Okay, welcome back to McCarthy Performance. We're going to be setting the crank in the 283. Um, went to a king bearing. I'm not crazy about the clearances that I'm getting, but they are heads and shoulders above the bearings that I had in it before. Um, just a tip, if you get a bearing that reads not correct, and if you measure them all and you have one that's a bigger, sometimes you can flip the shells around and juggle them and get clearance. That's one way of doing it. If you happen to have one that's a little odd and you have one that's a little big, you can sometimes try to juggle them. If the housing bore isn't out of whack, my housing bores aren't out of whack. I had to do a little bit of juggling around to get the clearances where I was happy with them. I'm just tucking the rope seal in a little bit around the corners with an X-Acto knife. How I was taught how to put a rope seal in. You've seen how I made a driver up to drive it in. And I am going to put some STP lubricant on this seal on the rope. It's just something that I've always done, and that's how I was taught. You know, you probably could use some engine assembly lube, but I have some old STP, and that's pretty much the only thing I use it for. So I got a nice film of that on there. I've got some Joe Gibbs assembly grease. Bearings have been wiped down with lacquer thinner a couple times. Engine has been cleaned out, washed, cleaned with carb cleaner, wiped down with lacquer thinner. It's as clean as she's ever going to be. So we've got that taken care of. Now we're going to set the crank. I'm going to start in the middle and torque my way out. I'm going to put the caps in position. I am going to tighten them with a speed handle. Now, tightening them with a speed handle is not torquing them. So really, don't matter how you tighten them up, as long as you torque from usually from the center and work your way out. Put a little oil on the threads. You don't need to put a lot of oil on the threads. You want a little oil on them. You don't want to hydraulic the threads. If they're blind, you don't want to put too much oil in there because bad things can happen. So a little oil under the head of the bolt, a little oil on the threads. That's all we need. Make sure that you're in the right position when you put it on. Don't use power tools, electric, air. You put them in with a speed handle. You don't over torque them. You put them in with something else. You can cock the cap and chip the cap or screw up the register. There's a certain amount of press that's supposed to be on the register. You don't want to destroy that. So that one's on there. I took them off and I'm putting them on the same way they came off. Obviously they're stamped with numbers. Sometimes you can't see it really good. I recommend before you take the engine apart that you restamp them if they are weak. Don't use a chisel like somebody did on this one and bang 2 chisel marks in there, or take a punch and punch all the holes in it. Don't do that. Buy some stamps. You know, the Taiwan ones or the import ones, you know, they might not be the best stamps in the world, but for the amount of jobs that you're probably going to do, you're not going to have a problem with them. You can take and also take a little die grinder, a Dremel type die grinder, and die grind the numbers in them. If you stamp them, make sure that you know the crank and the bearings are on it, or the cap's in the register. You don't want to hit it with the cap loose. You'll screw up the registers on the block. You don't want to do that. You chip out a register, or you chip a cap out. It's not a good deal. You know, take your time, use a little common sense. Everything will go good. Being this is a rope seal, and being that this I put this Joe Gibbs grease on here, the resistance of spinning the crank isn't going to be quite as free as it would be with 30 weight oil. You got to remember that. Definitely with a rope seal, you're going to have some resistance. But the crank should turn without too much struggle. If you have to put a wrench on it to turn it, then something's going on. Although with the big rope seals and the Pontiacs and that, you know, if it feels funny, take the seal out and try it. If it feels good, then you know what's going on. This one feels pretty good. The grease is rolling around it now, and it's pretty free. It's free as I expect it to be. Don't drop the bolts on the floor like I just did. Okay, I'll have to wash that bolt off. I'll get back and torque these caps up. Okay, we're going to torque up the caps. Like I said, I'm going to work my way from the center and work my way out. I'm leaving the rear cap off. I want to look at the rope seal and make sure that it looks like it's actually working on the crank. I can visually see that right now, but I want to check it. I'll put the top cap on. Obviously, I have to set the rope seal. Visually check the caps, make sure all the arrows are pointing forward. If there's no arrows, you want to make sure, usually on Chevrolets it's tang to tang, but I would recommend it before you take them off that you mark them. I have seen a GM block with the tang on the opposite side once. Not a very common thing, but you might want to do that. So we'll put the upper seal on it. In the cap, I have to install that and cut it down. So we'll start on that. Okay, so I got the rope seal roughly cut down. I don't have any good tips for them. They're a bugger. I usually cut them close with the scissors. This is some rope seal that I had laying around from God only knows how long. They do not offer the rope seal for the small block Chevrolet anymore under Felpro, but I'm sure you can still find it. This, I believe, is the older style. It cuts a lot easier than the newer stuff. The newer stuff, actually, it's actually got like Kevlar woven into the center core. It's really miserable to cut. So I made that driver. I've got my oil. I got my cap sitting on the a piece of aluminum. I was going to say it's sitting on the oil pump cavity, but it's not. It's tilting back a little bit. Going to give her a couple whacks. Feels like it's driven pretty good. Looks like it's seating pretty good, but it looks like we're a little high or low here and high there. So I'm going to peel it out. I'm just going to move it up a little bit. I'm going to tap it again. I'm going to test the cap without the bearing in it. I'm going to try not to mush it. I put a few seals in my day, rope seals. A lot of guys don't like them. I particularly am not in love with them, but I've done a few of them. But, you know, so far so good. So we look like we're pretty much there. I'm going to trim that one a little bit. Looks like we're pretty close. I'm going to tighten the cap up and see how it turns after I trim and tuck all that in, and I won't I'll save you the aggravation of watching that. Seeing how we're doing this right now, I'll add to a little bit of this. Now, you can buy a rope seal replacement. Obviously, you're not going to put a newer style Chevrolet seal in here to replace the rope seal. So they do make replacements for the rope seal in a Viton or you know, basically a newer design seal that's not a rope, whether it be Viton or whatever, the elastothermal material of that nature. You know, there's a lot of guys that think that they'll end their problems by replacing the rope, and sometimes that is true. I don't usually replace the rope unless I'm replacing the crank. Now on the Pontiacs, when I stroke them, or if I use a replacement, I'll put the seal in it. If it's in good shape, I'll put the seal in it. But the rope seal's got a wider sealing surface. You got to really make sure that that lip, when you replace it with a conventional type newer style seal, that lip is not riding on a pit or a groove or anything that's standing up, because it's going to leak like a miserable son of a gun. So that's my opinion on them. You know, you got a different opinion, that's fine. But as far as I'm concerned, you know, unless you can have the crank reground on the seal surface and straightened out or welded if it needs to be welded, you're starting to get into a lot of aggravation just to run a one-piece seal. In the long run, is it worth it? Well, you'll have to figure that one out yourself, but I really hate to say I never had one leak. I've never had anybody call me and say that the rear main seal's leaking. You know, you're going to expect to see a little bit of oil on the ground with a rope seal. I would say that if it's perfectly dry and there's nothing coming out of it, you're really lucky. But you know, it's, you know, these old engines, they leaked a little bit, you know, and everybody's used to something that doesn't leak. But anyways, getting back to the seal, I think on some of these older cranks, unless you're going to go through a lot of trouble, the rope is the best way to go on some of them if you can get good rope seal. That's another story on itself. You know, the earlier ropes seals seem to be better than the newer ones. Depends on who you get it from. So, you know, you're really throwing the dice any which way you go. If you go with a newer style seal on these, or if you use the newer rope that's available currently. It's a tough call. Obviously, when you build an engine, you sure don't want to hear a phone call saying somebody, you know, hey, it's leaking, you know. I mean, most of the guys in this business are very conscious of what they're doing, and I'm most certainly sure that nobody wants to build a leaky engine, and nobody likes hearing that phone call. So we'll get this trimmed down and we'll tuck it in, because this X-Acto blade isn't sharp enough to cut that down. I'll cut it down with something else. I've got some sharper razors, and we'll test it and we'll make sure that it spins and everything works and looks good. Okay, I've got the rear main seal. cut and fitted to the top of the cap. I'm going to put a little bit more STP on here. I don't know if you can see, but I've got this one trimmed down pretty good. It's a little higher than flush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the cap on it, tighten it up, see how it fits. This one's a little bit proud of the cap. I've tried to, if you put a little STP on here, and you can sometimes tuck some of the threads in there of the seal, the rope seal. So I'm going to tighten that up. I'm going to give the crank a couple turns. I'm going to take it back off. I'm going to try to tuck some of the threads or nip some of the threads off if they're standing up. And then we'll put the bearing on it, adjust the end play on the crank, and it'll be kind of a done deal. Sorry about the voice, it's going in and out. I had a cold for 2 weeks now. I can hardly get rid of it. Okay, we're going to tighten it up without the bearing in it. Okay, I'm going to spin the crank a couple times. Make sure. Okay, I got a wrench on it. I can turn it. There is a fair amount of resistance on it. It is getting easier as it's turning. I'm going to turn it a few more times. It's going to put a little bit more lubricant on it. I'm going to check it to make sure that none of my threads are hanging out of the surface. I'm going to trim it, and then I'm going to put the rear cap on it. I think I'm going to call it good. I'll just kind of recap here. I've cranked it around a few times, and you can see my rope seal is a little bit up, not much. I'm going to put a little bit of aviation Permatex on here. I'm going to put some on here. Put my cap on. I'm going to put a little bit more lube on here, but I'm happy with that. I think that's good. I think that's correct. Not a seal expert, just saying I think that's going to be good. There's quite a bit of goodness on there, so I think that's pretty good. Put my rear cap on with my bearing in it. I know how much preload there is, or resistance there is turning it, so I'm not going to get all excited about a cap being cocked or anything like that. I know that everything's good. We've checked everything. Everything's going to be fine. Put a little lube on the thrust. Get her on there. Okay, I've set the thrust, the end play. How I do that is I have an aluminum wedge, and I use this wedge and I drive it in. I usually go backwards and I tap the cap forward a little bit, tighten it up to about 35 pounds, tap it forward, take the wedge out, tighten it up a little bit, give it a whack back again. With the rope seal, you're going to have a lot of hard time feeling the end play, and that's what I usually use. Is I'll put a screwdriver in here or the aluminum wedge, and I'll bring the crank forward a little bit, and I'll measure it with a feeler gauge. That's kind of the only way you can do it on these. Putting a dial indicator on the front's worthless. All you need is clearance. That's all you're interested in. A feeler gauge does an excellent job of that. So that's how I do it. So we got the pistons. I'm going to check them for twist. You know, I rebuilt these a while back. I'm almost sure I checked all the rods. We had to replace 2 or 3 of the rods in this engine because the mice just ate it up. If you go back and look at some of my old videos, they made a mouse house in the oil pan, and it was like a bundt cake mold. When I popped the pan off, it was perfectly shaped as an oil pan. So I think the 7 and 8, and I think maybe 5 really took a hit. So, but I balanced them all. And of course, this is an old engine. We want to make sure that there's no twist in them. Now I got this Sunnin. There's if you want to know, there's a Storm Vulcan that Storm made or put their name on it and made it. That's an excellent one. That one really will dial you right down. This one's a little bit primitive, but it will check for twist and bend in the rod. And it's pretty simple. You put it up here like that. You measure it with their plates. This one here goes alongside the piston. You just hold it on the skirt and you just look down it, and you know, if it's level here to there, it's pretty much good that way. And then of course, you know, you put this on here like that, and that'll check it if it's bent this way. And they're all good, but the Storm will actually hold it like this, and it'll tell you on a scale where the beam is. But they look good. Of course, I check them for a magnetic field, and I've already done that. You know, the machine's actually got a little bit of magnetic field into it right there, if you see that. But all the rods and everything are good, so we don't want to put an engine together with a magnetic field in the rods. We can take that out. So I believe the machine that I have is a Magnaflux machine, and you can magnetize the part, or you can take the magnetism out of the part. Excuse me, I'm having a hard time with my voice today. And you know, you can check it with this. So obviously you don't want to charge a rod up with the bolts in it. That's kind of a no-no. So if you're going to check your rods, you want to make sure you check them without the fasteners in them. If they have a little bit of charge in them, I don't see the problem taking the charge out if the bolts are already pressed in it. You know, it can happen. So I think we're going to leave it right here today. I'll be putting the rods in tomorrow. I have a different set of bearings for the rods, and I could not get cleave lights for the mains. I ended up with Kings. I think I mentioned that. I have cleave lights for the rods, and I had some Engine Pros that I wasn't really happy with. They seem like they have a lot of taper in their bearings, and I have a cleave light in one of them, or them all, and I'm really happy with the clearance, and I'm really happy with the as far as going across to measuring the bearing. There's not a lot of taper there to speak of. Nothing to get excited about. So that's where we're going to leave the 283 today. Thank you for watching my videos. Thank you for watching my videos. It'd be great if I could get some more people to subscribe to my channel. It would allow me to get better equipment. For the 300 and some people that are watching my channel, thank you very much. The only way that I'm going to continue videoing with better equipment is if my channel becomes bigger. I have no problem doing videos as they are right now, but I would like to get some better equipment. Being that I'm a full-time machinist and all my money goes into the shop, I really can't afford to be buying equipment that I don't need. And right now, as 300 and some people watch my channel, I don't feel the need to buy it right now. When it goes up, if it does go up, I will buy better equipment and better editing equipment. And this is kind of new all to me. Just for some knowledge to give to you, I was self-taught. I've learned this from people over the years, and a lot of great people that unfortunately are not here anymore, and some of them that are fairly old, and I don't mind sharing some of my knowledge with you if it helps you. I guess that's all I really wanted to say, and thank you for watching.